Why? So what?
Clearly, you've not been to Norway.
Why? So what's the culture there, Ellen?
Culture is they have too much money. That's the culture.
I'm asking Ellen.
Yes. Well, she's not going to tell you that. She's Norwegian.
Very modest and humble, I would imagine. Yeah.
This is going to be
That's
my excuse
okay.
for
Ellen,
everything.
Can't hear
Ellen.
I want to
Don't
hear
feel
Ellen.
the pressure.
It doesn't really matter who pays.
Right.
When you pay this time, I'll pay the next time, then you'll pay, and it adds up in the end.
And normally everyone pays for themselves, but the guy who asked me, the manager of the shop was from India, even though we're in Stockholm. And so
he's surprised.
He thought, I would pay. And I was like, listen, buddy, we're in Sweden. Like, if anything, she's going to pay. Like,
This is why she's always so quiet, because she's busy licking her fingers to thumb through the notes.
You see, she's holding on to a unicorn. Come on.
Yeah, Ellen, what you guys don't understand is that unicorn is genuinely just a placeholder for her actual unicorn.
Well, the unicorn actually just shit stacks of money.
That's nice.
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Hello.
Hey. So we got to make sure the tweets are pinned at the top. We live stream the event on Twitter to the Twitter account at TNATW, which are the first letters. Apparently, somebody told me one time that those letters are not random. TNATW happen to be the first letters of tech news around the world.
Oh my God.
Which, by the way, we are now up to...
That were a word. What?
I just never noticed.
Yeah.
But by the way, Tyler, the replay, the links work as well.
Mm-hmm. And right, so everybody who's on, anyone who speaks at all during this tech news around the world, you will have this room that we are in will magically appear in your profile page going forward, and you can replay the room with all of everything about the room. Like, you can watch it just like you're in it now, but it's like a reenactment of the room. And you can even click on the profiles of the people in the room and see their bios when you're watching the replay of the room. It's kind of amazing.
That's actually really cool.
Super cool.
Yes, and you can also skip the speakers. That's so convenient.
Yeah, and there's a fast forward button. Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
So here we go.
Tyler, I need to pin the links.
Already did. Links have been pinned.
I'm talking about the article links. You need to give me the green bean.
Okay, right. Hang on. Okay, here we go.
Then we can start.
I just got a pop-up. It says, "Are you sure you want to make this user a moderator?" Jeez.
Very sure.
I think it's time for a poll. Let's do it.
Cheryl's been getting aggressive about the green bean.
Big decisions here.
I need to. I have over that green bean. My call now. I cannot idle. I have work to do now. I have to be on alert, like 100%. I can't sleep now. I can't snooze now.
Drunken with power.
Cal's gonna come in here like, wait a minute.
I'm just here to support Tyler as much.
No, really, she isn't. She manages it well. She's not.
Cal is listening all the time. Tyler yesterday proved it.
Hey, baby.
Hi, Michael.
Okay, so.
Oh, baby. Okay, let's start. Sorry.
Okay, where's the air horn, everybody? Before we all end up in trouble.
Air horn.
Air horn, please. Where'd it go? There it is. Here we go. So the top story, happy Wednesday, November 10th, is from The Verge. It says that the judge in the Epic versus Apple trial, which is one of the biggest tech trials in recent years, where Epic Games, the maker of Fortnite, brought this massive lawsuit against Apple. And they brought in their friends from Spotify and Match.com and a whole bunch of others, saying, you know what? Apple is a big bully. They are forcing us to give 30% of all of our transactions with our users to Apple. Turns out to be about $60-some billion a year that Apple collects. And why can't we, for example, why can't Epic Games and Fortnite charge the users directly like they do on Sony PlayStations or on Microsoft Xboxes and etc.? And Apple says, yeah, well, they're our customers. They're not your customers. So Epic says, no, not really. We think they're our customers, and they don't really, we don't have a choice to give them, and there's no other place where they can use, they have Android. Android's kind of doing the same thing with 30%. Anyway, so what's interesting about this case is that the judge in this case says that Apple must comply. There was a ruling a couple months ago that said Apple must allow apps and the app creators a way to collect payments from their users directly without paying Apple 30%. And then Epic, the CEO named Tim Sweeney, says to Apple, hey, Apple, cool. So when you're going to bring our account back, because you removed us from the App Store, so we can't even put our apps in the App Store because we don't even have an account to put the apps in. And Apple said, well, we're not going to put your account back until you're done suing us. And there's no more appeals, because even Epic Games said, well, we're going to keep, this isn't over. We're going to keep suing you for more and more and more and more and more. And Apple says, okay, well, we're not going to bring your account back until you're done. And now the judge says, no, you can't do that. We ruled that you have to allow them to collect payments directly from the users. That means now, even if there are further appeals and further cases, that is inconsequential to the ruling. So that's that's the headline today, which is that the judge in the Epic versus Apple trial says that Apple must comply with the previous order, letting developers link to external payment options, denying Apple's stay request. And what's interesting about Apple's request is Apple was asking, well, hey, Judge, this is going to be a real burden, and this is going to take a long time, like a really long time. This is really complicated to allow apps to link, that's really going to be really difficult and really complicated. And oh boy, that's going to take a really long time to figure out how to let app developers collect money from their users. I mean, that's going to take forever to figure out. So
just let us do it through webhooks, and we're all good, man. Just leave us alone.
Right. So this is the point.
Give us our webhooks, baby.
Right.
We're rocking and rolling.
Right, because as Maurer and every web developer knows, we already do this on this thing called the internet, where we charge our users for stuff. It's called a browser, and we charge our users directly in the browser. There's no reason it should be any different inside of your apps. And Apple's making this big song and dance and dog and pony show, trying to claim that it's this big ordeal. Here's the quote from Apple about why they need what they call a stay, which means let's hold off on any actions. They say this will be the first time Apple has ever allowed live links in an app to digital content. It's going to take months to figure out the engineering, the economic, the business, and other issues, says Apple's attorney Mark Perry. It is exceedingly complicated. They have to be guardrails and guidelines to protect children, to protect developers, to protect consumers, to protect Apple. And they have to be written into guidelines that can be explained and enforced and applied and yada, 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 yada. And the judge says...
We have it already. We have it. It's called Stripe. It's called Stripe. They do all of that stuff for you.
Automatically. On the internet.
Yes.
There are lots of apps inside of browsers that collect money from their users. Just like e-commerce. Everyone's charging trillions of dollars a year through browsers. And there's no problem. So this is a whole bunch of bullshit that you're trying to bring up in court. And guess what? Guess what the judge said? And guess what Epic Games says? So Epic says, Epic framed Apple's request to as a delay tactic, which it obviously is, made without any real commitment to change. Quote saying, Apple does nothing unless it is forced to do it, said Epic's attorney Gary Bornstein. The judge was skeptical of Apple's request, particularly because it asked for an indefinite stay on the injunction, despite Apple just wanted more time to evaluate risks. Here's the quote from the judge. You haven't asked for additional time. You've asked for an injunction, which would effectively take years. You asked for an across-the-board stay, which could take 3, 4, 5 years. Perry, the Apple's lawyer, responded that Apple wanted to delay the changes until the case was resolved, saying that it was confident we're going to win the appeal. And the judge says, yeah, but that ain't how the law works, you dimwit. I made the ruling now. You can challenge it if you want. And when you challenge it and when you win, then you can flip things back. But I made a ruling. So welcome. We understand you're the world's biggest company. We understand you think you're bigger than the legal system. And now we know who the bully is in this case.
The judge.
Judge Judy. Judge Judy.
I mean, you already knew where I was going to side on this, but the bottom line is, like, you're right. They are the biggest company in the world, and there is a reason for that. And it's not because of lowering standards to bullshit requests like this. And they have to take their time to make sure that, I mean, think about it. If I'm just random developer long twat and I get an app in the app store and then I decide to just randomly place a link to Pornhub, and now your kids are getting, like, a million kids download this thing and end up on Pornhub, and now Apple's in trouble for all of this, that, and the third, because they decided that, they had to rush this thing up to market instead of making sure there's a way to make sure that these types of things are blocked and people aren't going to be able to take advantage of it and abuse it and all this stuff. Like, I understand that everybody wants to bring Apple down to Android levels, but that's just ridiculous. If you want the Android experience, just get a damn Android. Why is everybody so gung ho on trying to force Apple to be something that it's not? Apple is a walled garden, and that's literally the reason some people like myself like to live in it. I don't want all this extra bullshit that people have to deal with on Androids. If I did, I would just go to Android. They don't have to be a damn Android clone. You don't have to bring them down. But you know what? We all know that I'm sleeping with Tim Cook, so I guess I'll just stop there.
What?
Yeah, yeah.
Leave the
Because
Did that just break the whole room? What happened?
out from the back end, on the server. So there's ways to do what you just described. You could do that right now in the Apple stores. With the apps, anybody could do that, but people
But
typically
Apple
don't
won't
do
get in
that.
trouble for it because of the laws and the different things that are in
No,
place.
the payment, the same thing, dude. You just sit there and you got a payment. You go through Stripe and you're good to go, right? We live in an integrated world now. We live in
But
an
that's not the route
integrated
that they're
digital
that's not the
society,
route that
right?
they're going to take, though, because if that's the case, then they're
The,
going to
the,
be
the point
charging
is they
from
could do
Stripe
it.
30% every time somebody uses it.
Dude, this is all about the cheese. It's simple. There's a lot of cheese, right? They're like, all right, so we're gonna sit there and play with the cheese a little bit. If we postpone this case for a bit, right?
Yep.
It's $80 billion or something, right? What did you say? Like
Per
60 to
year.
80 billion. That's a lot of
Yeah,
dough,
per
dude,
year.
right? Just postponing the case alone is extremely profitable
Correct.
for the company.
Of course it is.
Right? It's about the cheese, dude. Like there's a way
No,
to force
Make
everybody to use Stripe
nobody
and
ever
and,
said
and,
it's
and,
not
and
about
do
the
it. Just
nobody ever said it's
but
not
if you
about the
bring the cost
cheese.
down, right, then developers could go develop stuff, right, without
The
a thirty
cost was
percent
already
tax.
brought down.
but I
That's not
think
the point of it at all anymore. And honestly, the cost isn't the point of any of this in the first place. As somebody who used
They
to stream,
disallow.
as somebody who used to
They stop
stream
apps.
Fortnite, as
Hold on,
somebody who
time out.
used to
Wait.
Ring the
stream
bell,
Brooke, by the way,
Tyler.
Fortnite,
Ring the bell.
as
they
No, you
someone who
stop.
talk
used to
over
They
each
stream
stop
other.
Fortnite,
apps.
Yeah.
no,
They
because
stop
that's not what
apps.
the point of
They
it
Mauer,
all
stop
let
them
him
if they're
is.
let him
using
make a
Stripe,
point,
and it's all
Mauer.
completely safe.
Mauer,
Hold on,
let him
it's
As
talk.
completely safe.
somebody who used to
It's Maher, by the way. It's
stream
Maher.
Fortnite
Mm-hmm.
on Twitch, literally for years, when this thing first happened, I sat there and watched that cocky ass CEO come in and literally, on all sorts of deleted tweets, talk about how he's going to bring Apple down and this and that and the third, and just literally just this dude had this huge chip on his shoulder and he couldn't figure out a way to do it, and then he found a way to do it. And that's literally what this was all about, was just this dude's fucking, he had a vendetta against Apple from day one, and everybody played into it, and he somehow positioned his company, which by the way we use in the film industry. Literally, they're one of the biggest companies in the world, and you guys run around calling them the fucking little guy, which is the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen in my life. But Unreal's not the little guy at all, not even close. Epic's not the little guy at all, not even close. All of this little guy bullshit is nonsense. Yes, little compared to Apple, but not little in any form of that word. And they came in and positioned themselves that way and got everybody on their side, when in reality 30% was being paid to Epic every time me and other friends who are developing things use their software after it makes a certain amount of money, which is exactly what Apple was doing. The only difference is Apple didn't attack Epic over using Unreal Engine, and none of us ever attacked Epic over the 30% they were charging. Not only does Epic charge it, Steam charges it, fucking everyone charges it. Sony charges it. Even Xbox charges it. If you're putting shit on there, you're paying 30%. But Apple's always the main target. Everyone always sticks a target on Apple's back because the king is the king, and that's just the way that goes. But stop acting
No,
like
but
this
wait, you're talking
industry
about
is
stacks
clean
on
and
stacks.
everybody else isn't doing it.
Wait. You're talking about stacks on stacks, homie, right? There's a big difference. When you're paying
Oh,
30% and then you got 30% on 30% on 30%, that's when you start having problems, right? So an
but
an
Apple's
example is
30% is the only
Spotify. Hold on,
problem,
but let me
apparently.
finish. Spotify has a disadvantage because they got to give 30% to Apple, right? Yes, they might charge 30% for them to operate, but they got to give 30% to Apple. So Apple takes 30% of everything
If the
first.
iPhone didn't
Wait,
exist,
no, let's talk about
where
that.
would Spotify
Wait.
be?
They
Where would
take it, they're
Spotify
like
be?
30%. Wait, hold on. 30% tax on everything first, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then these other guys get tagged, right? So, but it's not that there's, oh, well, create a different way to do it, but at least don't disallow developers who already created apps and invested money are in here and they ride for a while. And as soon as they can start making money, then they get on their radar. They're like, yo, we don't like that you have this in there no more.
Where would
It was
Spotify
okay
do
in the
that if Apple
beginning.
didn't
It was
exist?
okay in the beginning because everybody does it,
Where would
right?
Spotify do this if Apple didn't
Well, hey,
exist?
I did it, right? I figured out how to do it through Stripe
Where?
using
If
web
Apple
on
didn't
the
exist, where
website,
would you do
and
it?
then on demand app. What we're gonna start making money? They're gonna come be like, oh, you got to stop
Where
that.
would Spotify? No, my
30%
question
tax.
is, where
That
would
makes
Spotify sell
that raises the
Spotify
tax
if
on
Apple
everybody,
didn't
right?
exist?
Because and what they're gonna do is say you can't do this system that's already in place. You're using the web to do it. No, we don't like that.
My question
Right,
seems
because
like
see,
a hard one
hold
for
on,
you to
I'm using
answer.
their app for a user experience, and then I'm using the web for a payment portfolio process, and it has nothing to do with the App Store. And they're
So then why are
encroaching.
they
They
trying to be in the
encroach.
App
Hold
Store?
on. They encroach, and they say if you're processing payments on a outside service, even though there's a lot of other web services too, right? You have an app, but you also have an ecosystem of a bunch of stuff that they also use, like a lot of web services too, exclusively. But if you are using the app, they want 30% on all of
Why
it.
do you want to be in the App Store so bad?
Dude,
Ooh,
that's a
good. That's a
retarded
great question.
argument. That,
Why do you
okay,
That's a
want to
why do
great
you
be in
want to
question.
be in?
there?
Okay, the
So
reason
that's
you
what I
want
was
to be in
going to
the App
say because they
Store
can
because
tap
you
into
want to make that's where
Apple's.
that's where the users are, right? It
Uh-huh.
makes
Uh huh.
that's right.
And
And
don't you
yeah, it
think
Exactly,
is.
Apple
It's
right?
a
deserves
hard.
their
Hey,
cut for
listen.
providing those users?
But they're encroaching, bro. They're encroaching.
They're
They're
not
coming
encroaching.
outside.
It's their own goddamn store that they, by the
It's
way,
not. But no.
fucking invented. They invented this
You can
entire thing.
create. You can. That's not how it works. You can
No,
create an
you're
app
trying to cut off
and an
the
experience.
head
No,
of the actual
no.
king.
Dude,
They created the
hey,
shit. You're
it's
basically
the
going into
king. They're right.
Target.
They're
No, you're
collecting
going into
30%
Target and
of
saying, I
every
demand
single
shelf
platform.
space. Give me shelf space and you don't get your cut. I don't care that you're Target and providing this space for what I want to sell.
It's a good
Yeah, I
argument.
want to come in here and just sell my shit for free all over your shelves. No, it doesn't work like that. When someone spends all their time building, developing, and creating a place and a space for you to come in and sell your product, you don't get to tell them how much they do or don't
No,
charge. Take your shit to
hold
another
up,
store.
hold up, dude. No. Yeah, but you also don't get to sit there and be like, yo, they're gonna come inside of your data and understand all of what you do and Sherlock your ass either,
Yes, you
right?
do if it's
If you
yours. It's your rules.
that's okay for them to do that, right? They could come on up in
Can
our
I come into
space
your
and
house and
take
just
all of
start
our
cooking in
stuff
your
and
kitchen
then just
They're
however I
like
charging
feel
a
fucking
like?
do
price
all
to
over the
enter
place.
their
That's
home, their
cool. We're gonna be
ecosystem.
cool with that as developers, right? Developers who are gonna invest a shit ton of money into the Apple
Then go
system, right? And
elsewhere.
then they come
Can
in
we
and you
have
get
one at a time? None of
Sherlock,
these are
right?
our
They jack
business.
your shit, right?
I'm
That's
loving this
cool.
fight. This is great.
Yeah,
Can't we
exactly.
all
I'm
You
gonna
just
What
fight
a
gotta
for
go
cool
the I'm
story.
elsewhere
gonna
then,
fight for the
bro. That's my
developers,
point
dude,
though.
because
I'm
I
not
actually
gonna just
develop
walk
stuff.
up in your house and just
It's not
start changing
no.
up your
It's
rooms,
no.
rearranging your
You're going
fucking
out in the
furniture.
street and saying if
No,
you
that's
own
what
the
you're
street.
saying.
No, you don't own the street, dude. You don't own the
That's what
street.
you're
If I'm
saying.
processing payments through Stripe in a web portal,
That's what
you
you're
don't own
saying.
that shit. If I
It's
use your payment
my
processing
phone.
service, that's cool. But if
It's
you don't
my app
own
store.
the outside, you
I'm
don't own the
Apple.
full platform. The app is one piece of an ecosystem,
No,
right?
that
You're not
app
gonna
Does
has
the
just say
app
nothing
I
to
take
though?
30% of everything in that ecosystem,
But does
Okay.
this
It
right? It
should
now
be
don't
a
set
work
the
All
that
right.
way.
All
precedence?
right.
It don't
That's
work
the
that
end.
way,
Does
homie.
this now set the
Round
precedence
one.
Bro, bro,
though?
bro. When he hits the bell, that's the end. Stop
That's the
talking.
end of the round one.
Yes.
Let's
What
get
what what
ready
what
repeat
to
battle.
what are the scores after that
rumble.
round? We need to hear the
Okay.
scores.
This grudge match sponsored by Subway sandwiches, and
Apple.
but
Believe
Yeah.
fresh,
Because
baby.
Tyler had one.
Apple is pinned on top,
I
so
just
Apple
want to
is the
say good
sponsor.
morning.
yeah,
Hey,
Mike,
Apple.
I
Good
I
morning.
gotta give that round to Michael because Michael brought up a great point. I mean, and
Yes.
Yeah,
Michael knows
I
that
gotta
I'm
give it to
actually
Michael as well.
philosophically I'm a bit more. I'm actually on both sides. Honestly, I can argue both sides of this, and you guys argued both sides of this very, very well. And but your point about so why are you want to be in the App Store so bad? You don't have to be in the App Store, but why you clearly have a real interest in being in it. That hence you're acknowledging that there's a lot of value there, and you're willing to pay for some of that because people paid 30% for many years without really having expressing a whole lot of beef about it. So
I
they,
don't. Is it
But
really
the
that way?
Apple
Because what
Store,
they do,
the
they
Apple
come in
Store
later.
cannot
They
be.
let you create. And here's the other thing, right? At the end of the day, you're coming into a platform, and once you get into it, there's precedent that's set, right? Or you get in and you start creating. You're helping create the platform. The value is the collective value of all the developers coming together, working in that platform. When you start off with a process where it's kind of open and free and you invested into it and then they add tax on top of it later, that's not cool, man.
well, there's two things.
And
What's
that's what
happened
happened.
is because the App Store has been so incredibly successful and there are literally millions of apps in the store itself over time, because it's become the shopping mall has gotten so big, it's literally a city, and it's even
Yes.
you might even say it's a country or a planet, that it's not as valuable as it used to be because it's getting harder and harder and harder to find a smaller app. So smaller apps are starting to question the value isn't as high as it used to be, and at the same time, the level of service from Apple in terms of the amount of time it takes to approve an app and the whole app approval process and all of this is becoming more and more of a hindrance. And so people are starting to think, you know what? This 30% used to be, we would pay it happily, willingly, and now we're begrudgingly paying it. And that's the evolution that has occurred over time as the App Store has gotten kind of way, huge. And it's harder and harder to compete in the App Store, and the wait times with the updating and all that. And so hence, but I think there's another interesting angle to all of this, which is, isn't it interesting that this whole showdown is starting right as the metaverse is starting? Because what happens
That's what
with
it's about.
this 30% tax that became a default kind of standard, as Michael says, in in the ever since the iPhone came out and the App Store came out in 2008, 9, 10, whatever it was. And now that we're going into the metaverse, if Apple, whenever Apple does announce their big metaverse hardware, will it be the case that all of the apps in that metaverse will also pay 30%?
That's what I was asking. Does this
Yeah.
now
Yep.
set the precedence as to how they do business? Does this decentralize their business model
Well,
moving forward?
that's why it's so weird, because
Very good question.
Epic Games makes a lot of games that today already act like the metaverse.
Tyler, and also Facebook has to like literally stand back and really think about this because
not only are VR apps coming out, now we have mixed reality apps, and we also have the progressive web apps that are going to hit the market that you could actually buy from the Oculus store. So they're going to have to really think about whether
Hmm.
the 30% is a good strategy and whether they want to go down that road that Apple went down, or do they want to lower those fees in percentage.
Well, with
You
this
also
stay
have to
in this
think. You
order,
also have to consider there's places like South Korea that are already planning a full on government. They're already put like the actual government of physical South Korea has already started planning and laying out the virtual government of the metaverse South Korea. And you got to figure like there's places that are going to be doing their own thing in their own metaverse that overall will or will not choose to get under the blanket umbrella metaverse, whoever ends up running that. I know Facebook has, they're the front runner for this right now just because they kind of publicized it first, but they're not the only ones out here building a full-on infrastructure. And as JT will tell you, we've been discussing this when Victoria and I used to host our metaverse and VR rooms. We've been discussing this for literally almost a year at this point. The metaverse is
So hold on. So
going
let
to
me
be
ask you a
the
question.
very that hang,
Let me ask
hang
you a
on, buddy,
question.
hang on.
Real quick, wait.
Hey,
He was
So
in the
do
middle
we
of a point.
want
Let him
on a
finish the
entire
second.
point,
Hang
metaverse
Mao.
on a
tax?
second. Hang on just a second, brother. I appreciate your chutzpah, but just let me get this out there. The metaverse is going to be this place where Apple technically, if everybody has the same start as Apple does, which they do because we're all building the metaverse now together, people should be able to drown out what Apple does in the metaverse. If what Apple does is really so bad, people are going to have other alternatives and options, and they'll be able to just literally reject what Apple does, and it won't be allowed to happen that way in the metaverse. If Now the problem is, and this will always be the problem, do people want that trade-off? Do the people who support Apple, the people who work and create these wonderful apps that have created this amazing economy in the App Store, and the people who, like myself, use it and expect this type of quality, are they really going to turn their backs on something that they love so much for the small few that do not? Now, I have other points on this, but I know you're just jumping at the chop to talk, so go ahead, brother.
All right, cool. Well, first of all, here's the people you want to make happy first and foremost: the developers. Dead simple. Like,
And
we're
they
going
are.
into a metaverse. A lot of the metaverse builders, I built stuff, and there's certain stuff I will sink the ship. I don't give a damn, right? Like, there's a point when developers are like, no, we're not. Like, round two, we're in round two right now, right? Round two is like, hey, we already kind of seen what you guys do, the progression. Like when we first started platforms, we're all excited. We're all building stuff. Everybody's building stuff. Yeah, okay, we saw what it progresses to. It progresses to a 30% tax. We don't want to do the metaverse that way. That's what it is, you know? Like, the developers don't want to be like, they don't want the old system. And if you make the developers happy, you'll get a much better system for the society, by the way. Here they come. So that's really like, and by the way, when it comes to the metaverse, it's a hardware play, right? Because it's like whoever's got the hardware and then hardware attached to the software play, and you got a platform out there that everybody will be using, and that metaverse will be built by tons of different
Bro,
developers.
but
That's the whole
here's the
point.
thing. You
Many, many,
said
many developers
there's
will build
one
out
small
pieces of
thing.
that
There's one
metaverse,
small thing
and
you
then
said that I just need you to back
let me
up and
finish
finish.
though,
Well, I
and
have to
then
correct
and
one
then
small thing. You said that it built up to that, but when Apple first had its very first 500 apps, it was already 30% from the jump. That's not something that built
but they
up.
didn't
It's
enforce
been
it,
that
dude.
since
They
day
didn't.
one.
They don't enforce it all the way through either, right? So like you can sit there and use webhook. You can use a Stripe system. You could go through the web to process your payments, and a lot of people do that. And then they don't say anything to that until it becomes a problem. So it's not like enforced across the board. They don't go and sit there and investigate all the millions of apps that are out there right now who have payment processing in there through web, right? Because if you sit there and you look at that full pool, there's a lot of them,
There are.
right? Okay, and then they selectively enforce that shit.
But to that
It's not
point,
What's up with that?
it's
selectively.
an effort versus reward,
Yeah.
right? What
It's
reward is
almost
that?
like, hey, build it all up, and you could do your web thing, and at any time they're gonna just come in and say, well, now we decided we want in on that.
Well, yeah, because you were already breaking the rules. They can jump in
How is it
anytime they
breaking the
want to.
rules? No. The definition of generated through, I'm using your web app and your web tools to present app information. When it comes to the business side, I take them over to my shopping cart over here on the browser.
Okay, so like
So
it's like
why
this.
do
But
you
I understand
encroach
what you're
in
saying.
on
I
that
get what
side
you're
of
saying.
things?
I
You know
get
what
what
I'm
you're
saying?
saying. But I get
Because I
what you're
also
saying.
got a
So it's like
website.
this. It's
So
like
it says
this.
that there's also a website. There's also other tools that are being used, and there's no 30% tax on that stuff, man.
Here's a metaphor for that. It's
No
kind of
other.
like if
It's not like
it's kind of
SendGrid.
like
It's
if
not
there's
like
a doggy
hold up,
door
hold up,
in
hold
my
up. Watch this.
kitchen
It's
door.
not like SendGrid. It's not like SendGrid that does the email communications and the notifications and whatnot. And Twillo and all the other guys that are coming in saying, "Yo, check it out. We get 30% of everything you do this that you generate revenue with." That's a problem, right? How come they don't get to come in? Twilio, SendGrid. We use their platform too. Can they encroach in and take over 30%?
Were they
Because
doing that from the
communications mean
beginning?
the point is, dude, you can't have
No, you
you
got to
can't
answer
have
that
that shit.
question. You can't
Nobody
skip
wants
the
that
part
stuff,
that
dude.
mess
Don't
up
nobody
your
want nobody
argument.
building.
No, but
Dude, we're already talking. There's
that's
like
not the
thousands of
best.
people. We're already
But
talking
Mauer,
about metaverse constitution up in here and Clubhouse. A bunch of people
Bro,
in
you can't
Clubhouse.
keep
but
skipping the parts that
Like,
screw up what you're trying to say.
but that isn't a good example because SendGrid isn't, and I use SendGrid, and I used to. Matter of fact, my startup really was based on two services, which were specifically SendGrid and Twilio, and they're not giving me audience. They're not giving me. They're not helping. I mean, they're a tool that I use to service my audience, but they don't have an audience that I'm tapping into. Clubhouse has an
Mm.
audience that I'm tapping into. So if I was going to start making money on Clubhouse, I would expect Clubhouse to be like, you know what? How about we get a little cut out of that because it's actually our audience that you're, tapping into. That's a better example, perhaps.
Mm. I agree with
but then
that.
all right, wait. Let's talk about the other side of that real quick. Then, what about us that are bringing the audience in here, right? The ones that are because at the end of the day, we're bringing audience in, right? So the platform is a piece of
On their
code.
platform.
It's code that allows it. Yeah, that's right. That's right. See, that's what we got to address.
They get a
Who
cut.
owns stuff in the metaverse? You want to talk about real stuff? There's only a few ways you could basically project the holograms. Okay, whoever's going to get that IP, there's going to be blockers in that IP. There's only a few ways
Now,
in which
here's
you could
where,
interact
check
with the
this out.
hologram. You can haptic stuff,
This,
right?
this
If you
is
get
the
the
most,
IP in that,
this,
you're going to own a
hang
lot
on.
of the metaverse, dude.
Mauer, you are touching on what is probably the most important question in November of 2021, which is one of the when the web was, and where's Dr. Francine, because this is where she really
Yeah, I'll pin him. I'll
her
pin her in.
expertise really fits perfectly here. When the web was getting started, it was completely democratized, completely decentralized. Nobody really owned anything. Everyone, it was self-sovereign. Everyone owned their own blog and ran it on their own computer in their own bedroom. And all of those computers connected to each other to form the internet. And there was no massive power, centralized power, until the likes of the Googles and the Apples and the Facebooks started coming along. And now the web has become incredibly centralized because very few people are running their own websites on their own servers in their own bedrooms. They're using AWS or Google Cloud, or they're using Facebook or Substack or this or this. And then it's a handful of these services. And the question that I'm really leading up to here is, now that the web has become much more centralized, what does the metaverse look like? Because the likes of Dave Weiner and Joey Ito and Tim Berners-Lee and all the original OG web gangsters, who the vision was that the web was going to be this beautiful, open, democratic, decentralized platform. It no longer is that. It's all a bunch of walled gardens. And what does the metaverse look like? Because it looks like the metaverse is even going to become even more hyper centralized, not more decentralized. There are people who want it to be decentralized. They would prefer that the metaverse be a whole big open land, that we don't have all of these gates and fences and walled gardens, and that it all interoperates in a really nice way, and we all hyperlink to each other, and but watching how the trends go, and because there's a hardware component to the metaverse, that's another interesting bit, is you're going to need some kind of physical hardware device to engage in it in the form of these glasses, whether they be AR glasses or VR goggles or whatever you want to call them. And those are going to be the gatekeepers, because they're going to say,
Exactly,
oh,
the IP.
if you're using our hardware, then you got to agree to our terms of how we interpret the metaverse. or you're
Oh,
going
it's
to need.
worse. It's worse.
And there
Yeah,
goes the
It's the
concept of
IP.
even
paying to
the things
play.
that are built within the metaverse are the people are
But
gonna
the
need to be
IP,
paid. So
guys, but at the point in which the metaverse interacts with the human being is at the eyeball. That's the gate. It's about the holograms, and there's only going to be a few ways you could pitch up holograms. So it's not just the hardware; it's actually the software, the IP to pitch those holograms
I
is
don't
going to be an
understand why you're
interesting
that's
talking
piece of
about
but
land.
that's
holograms.
sparks
It's
say,
not.
oh,
You're actually
that's
thinking too
It's
Adobe,
not.
small.
that's
You're
No.
actually
Blenders
thinking
that
too small. It's not
handle
just at the eyeballs, and
all of this.
I'll sit here and tell you, as and JT can attest to this. Back when Victoria and I used to run our weekly metaverse rooms, we had a good 7% audience was blind, and they all actively
A great
participated
point.
in the metaverse. You're cutting out huge portions of what the
No,
metaverse is
no.
going to be.
Thanks for
Let
adding
me
that,
finish.
dude.
Let me
That's
finish. Let me finish. You're cutting off huge points of the metaverse when you say it's all about the eyeballs. And on top of that, and to go back to Tyler's point, even if we did allow for the metaverse to be the Wild West, even if we allowed for chaos, which by the way is how every civilization starts, it's all chaos for a time. But what we eventually end up realizing is that order is better. It really truly is. It's great to have decentralized things, but it's more about controlled chaos. It's more about, and this is what's going to happen in the metaverse. Cities are going to form. This is the reason that South Korea is already developing their own metaverse where virtual South Korea is going to exist because they already know ahead of time. Cities are going to form, places are going to form, walled gardens are going to form. It's just a matter of time before people realize that all the chaos it's great, but it needs to be under some type of governance. Now if you don't like that governance, what's great about the metaverse is it's fucking limitless, which means you can live in the fringes and you can live on the outside and you can go do your thing outside of those walls. It's all gravy. Do what you want, but don't get upset
almost.
when
Wait,
you
wait.
want to
Let's
go
talk
into
about
one of
that. Let's
those
talk about.
walls. But don't get upset when you decide you want to go into the gates of one of those walls, and there are rules in place with which you have to follow. Those are the rules with
But
inside
they
that
don't just get to
wall,
start
and you
building.
have to.
They don't start getting to build a wall while we're building our community. They don't get to secretly build a wall against everybody and say, by the way, check it out, you're in this box now, and
You're
we all
not
have
Yeah,
to.
in.
that's
They're
No,
not
dude,
dangerous.
building a wall around you. That's my point. You are at the gates, knocking and asking to come into their literal
dude,
city. When you get in
we're just
there, you
saying,
have to
don't
follow
stop,
those rules.
don't stop, don't listen. This, I think what's gonna happen is we're gonna have multiple countries. They're gonna spawn metaverses. Are gonna spawn left and right. You're gonna have different types. You're gonna have types which are completely anonymous in there. You got your own identity up in there, right? You're gonna have others which are augmented reality, augmented identities into into the metaverse, right? They're gonna all exist. And what we're saying here is let them all exist, right? Okay, because I don't think it's going to be just one master winning thing, right? I mean, the hardware is where the actions really got to go down, and that's got to be open so people could get different
This is
ability to
already
interact with the
happening with the
metaverse because it's
Oculus Store.
predominantly yeah.
Yeah,
So, but ultimately, as long as that hardware is not taxed, right?
Dr.
Yeah,
Francine?
But
but
the
there's
main point
also
is
Yeah,
there's
doc,
also
let it be free. Like, don't stop people. Don't go into people and say if you're using web money and you're processing money on the website over there using Stripe, which is actually they handle all of the legalities, all of the security, right? That's what they do. I love that because I don't have to deal with any of that. I don't have any
yeah, but
security stuff.
that's
They deal
also
with that.
that's
So
also a
so so
form. Stripe itself, as much as it's loved, is also a form of centralization because people used to
That's
have to
right.
hard code all their own stuff, which was a real pain in the ass. And there's a few people who do go through that process because they understand that. Dr. Francine, I want to turn it to you, and I specifically wanted you to come into this conversation. And thank you to Cheryl, I think, for pinging you in because the big
I
question.
was there all along. I was
Okay, great.
trapped in the
Yeah.
the,
audience.
the big question I think
Yes.
is where are the Dave Weiners reminding us of the importance of the open web when it comes to the metaverse?
Dave Weiner is on Facebook reminding us of the importance of the open web. That's exactly where he is. Um, he I think gave up because
Yeah,
nobody listened to him. But
right.
this is, by the way, the new pioneers of the open web would be the DeFi group, the
Totally,
decentralized group,
totally.
and they're trying to do the same thing, just with finance, but it's still the same. The principle is still the same.
Yeah, the philosophy.
So
Yeah,
So what happens is, I don't know who said it because they were way up on the top and I'm on the bottom, but whoever said it is right. Eventually, um, the walled gardens form. And
Yeah.
that's what's happening in crypto now. When I was
Mm.
first involved in crypto, it was Bitcoin and Ethereum, and all of a sudden, 1,000 flowers bloomed, and then they began to centralize. And it's very interesting how that happens. And I was there when the web first started, and Dave Weiner and his friends, we all were saying,
Doc
you know,
Searles. Yeah.
yeah, Doc Searles, he's still around, still saying the same thing.
Yeah.
Uh,
And
but
yeah, and it's funny how
nobody listens.
right. Well, nobody listened then because they didn't quite see it as clearly. They didn't foresee understand the importance of what we had back then in the early days of the web. I mean, we look back now nostalgically, like, holy shit, nobody. It was a fully, we were all running it in our own ways, and in come these mega corporations that just kind of sucked all the air out of the room, and slapped a whole bunch of kind of
Well, what they did was they found a business model for it, and the decentralized things still existed, but like Adam Curry is still a decentralized
yep,
is still a decentralized follower. And instead of going on Twitter, Adam Curry goes on Mastodon,
yep,
which is the decentralized version of the old decentralized version of Twitter. The problem is that the general person, and now the web is big enough to include a lot of people who are not geeks, it's much easier for them to log into Twitter than to start a server, even if it's much easier to start a server than it used to be, than to get on Mastodon. And
mm-hmm.
while I'm speaking, let me say to you that we're having this room for Chris on Thursday called Entrepreneurs Guard Your Health.
Pin
And
the link, Cheryl.
Already did.
Okay.
she already pinned it. But I want everyone to come for a number of reasons. Number one is that it's very, very important for entrepreneurs to understand. I've been around so long that I've seen a lot of entrepreneurs die from overwork and overexposure, so to speak, to their own dreams. And I would like to give some real good tips. And we have Heyman, who's a doctor, and we're going to have Dr. Dan. And just give some tips on how to guard against this and what it is that really is responsible, because more details are coming to light about how Chris died. And that's very important. And the other thing that's very important is that I'm wanting people to either participate in my free airdrop of Karma Coin, because it's a tribute to Chris. So it's my pinned tweet on my at Hardaway profile. So let's all try to do that, because that's another. And if we raise any money on it, and I think we will, because Rally is featured in CoinDesk today, um, if we raise any money on it, that goes to Chris, and it doesn't interfere with the GoFundMe's and everything that are going on now. So every little bit helps.
Okay.
That's amazing. Just want to say I will be there. Chris was, loved and missed, and every time I come in here, I feel like Chris is still here. But just one thing that I wanted to add to the previous story, and kind of to echo what JFK said about walls. Yeah, when you have a great place, like a great country, you don't have to build walls to keep people in. We should think of these walled gardens in this digital world in the same way as we think of something like the Berlin Wall. Yeah, it's great, but there should be access. There should be mechanisms that if you want to propose an alternative, that should be possible. Thank you.
Got a quick question. Is that room going to be recorded?
because I just noticed for where I am, it's going to be 2 a.m.
Oh,
So
yes,
it's a little
it
bit
will
late.
be. It will
Great.
be because guess what? We were recording before this and putting it out as a Spotify podcast, but
Oh,
we now
fantastic.
have the capability to do that within Clubhouse. Yeah.
Right. I know. I just wasn't sure if it was going to be recorded or not. And so it's great to hear that it is. That's fantastic. Thank you.
Okay, so next article. Actually, before we jump into the next one, Evan and has the link that I just tweeted, and if Cheryl can pull it from the Twitter account and pin it, that would be nice. It's and Michael mentioned it, or a couple people mentioned it, that Seoul, Korea will be the first city government to join the metaverse. The virtual platform will be a place for cultural events and city and business services. And
It's
how will
amazing how
When
fast
you're
they jump on things. I mean, how many governments will take years to figure this out? And meanwhile, Seoul is like, sign us up. It's just incredible how advanced
Well,
they are.
the reason that happens, and it's a very interesting thing that happens when the government, and this will lead in. I don't want this to go into that conversation, but the bottom line is when the people and the government are kind of willing to jump, like, and they're not busy thinking that one's after the other or actually being after the other, and they're all just willing to jump and move forward and kind of just get on board with a thing that'll help move everyone forward as a whole. And that happens over there a lot. It happens in Japan with technology a lot too. It's something that America fought. I swear to God, I've seen, like, there's bridges here in Los Angeles, bridges, buildings, down to a fucking flower shop that have taken years to finish building. I've seen bridges get put up over a weekend overseas. They'll put up a whole new freeway section over a weekend, and we struggled to get one building up over a year or more. And it's because there's a lot of bureaucracy, there's a lot of red tape, there's a lot of, are the workers going to be, and all this, that, and the third. But there's other places that are just like, hey, this is a thing we want to do.
There's something
Let's
beautiful about collectivism,
exactly.
Michael. It's like many hands lighten the load. You don't have to have a lot of pushback when a great idea comes
Mhm.
forward. Everyone toes the line and gets it done. I love it.
Exactly. And that's what we see a lot in places, in spaces like this. In South Korea, that's just one of those places where, and what's even crazier, look at where they're located. Look at who their direct neighbor is. Under the threat of immediate destruction, they still progress like this. We don't even have that kind of threat. In fact, our defenses are bigger than the next 30 combined, and still for some reason we can't tie our shoes. It's kind of outrageous that we're so far behind and so slow when it comes to these things.
So true,
Have you
Actually,
been to
Michael. And the
Seoul?
other piece to that is that while it's a conglomerate with many different business divisions outside of consumer electronics, Samsung is the company that any South Korean would want to work for. And so,
Mm,
given the prominence of Samsung within the ecosystem, within the country, if you will, and this kind of digital race to the metaverse, not only among like big tech, but then nationally, I think South Korea, and its leadership, they sense it. So it'll be very, very interesting to watch.
mm-hmm.
And they
You guys
leverage soft
understand?
skills in a great way too. Once they understand the product can essentially face their country forward, they move collectively to do so.
I just want to point out that it's significantly easier first for a mayor than a uh, like a president or
President.
prime minister or something like that. And I mean, the only thing that I comment about how slow things are, in the U.S., et cetera, and some of it certainly is, like a lot of it, honestly, like the delays are just how government contracts work, issues with unions, and then delays in deployment of funds and resources. But the other thing is, remember, our country is freaking enormous, and we don't have an authoritarian government. You need either something small or something authoritarian to make things happen really quickly. And there's a significant difference. I mean, a democracy is a little clunkier even in Switzerland, which is significantly smaller. They had to break it up in cantons and stuff. So all of this just to say that there's yes, a lot of it is, some failing, and I'm certainly not like, the US way is the only way, but I would say that there has to be a little leeway in the fact that our country is enormous and not run by a strong man, so that things are going to take time, and I'd rather have time. Who's got a hot mic?
I don't disagree with you, Alexandra. I don't. I actually agree with you, and that's a point that I meant to bring up. Is just when it's so small, it's much easier. South Korea fits into even just Lower California many times over. But the reality, though, when you're talking about certain things, just think of why is it that bridges bridges and streets are always like a big debate point in our presidencies? Shouldn't that should have been fixed like decades ago? How can it continually be such a big point to debate? It's at some point we have to hold them accountable for just getting the shit done, and it needs to be done at a much quicker pace. I mean, that's a basic thing. Just making sure a bridge isn't going to fall the fuck apart is a very basic thing, and it doesn't require all the extras. It just requires, okay, let's just go get this shit fixed, and that's that. But I understand what you're saying, and I do agree with you.
No, thank you. And about the bridges thing, that is a really interesting thing. So part of it is that the people who are in Congress tend to be older, right? And they're still of the era where our infrastructure, which was generally, a bunch of it was put up during Eisenhower, where they're like, we have the best infrastructure in the world. They're not updating their view of our system, of the systemic issues based on time and new information. Like that is just a common human problem. It's definitely like as you get older, I think that the likelihood or tendency to update your information based on time is just not as common. But the other thing is, so the way that appropriations work, which I think a lot of the people in the room actually already know, but appropriations is such a difficult, sticky issue. And part of it is because it doesn't generate revenue, right? So people in a jurisdiction want jobs that are going to continually pay people, not like a construction project that will be completed and basically only go to those, the money will go to those construction workers. They don't want something that is basically what they consider something that isn't either a benefit in taxes or a benefit that is jobs, right? So everything else literally outside of taxes and jobs is a hard sell because the people who are actually voting are considering their election possibilities, and the people who are electing are always like, what does this do for me? Now, most people, this is why we have this whole regulatory structure that deals with disaster and then remediating whatever caused the disaster instead of proactive regulation and enforcement. They should be doing this, okay, well, the bridge needs to be fixed. The bridge needs to be fixed. But you see the number of people who don't even, they want things that give them immediate satisfaction with either taxes, which is money you retain, or jobs, which is money you can earn. Like either way, it's money in their pocket. It's a very short-sighted view. It's a very what happens when you have a very like me first, independent, like sort of this non-collective thought, right? When you have collective thought, it's much easier to say like the bridge needs to get fixed or the road needs to get fixed because someone will get hurt, even if that person is not me, and that's not okay. But in our like independent first, and it's all about me and my taxes, and I get to control things, even if I'm not the most qualified to control something, I want to be the one that can control it. That's the problem, is that there isn't really this collective thought of someone's going to get hurt, but it won't be me, so I don't want to pay for it. That's a very different view. The
That's
thing about
why.
Soul that I wanted to think, though, is like, what are they doing with healthcare? I don't know if you read the article. I'm very interested in this concept of what they think a metaverse will do that is different from telemedicine or some other aspect. I'm not sure what healthcare is going to do in a metaverse at this point. Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
I'm more
Dr.
interested.
Francine.
Yeah. Go ahead, Francine.
Well, My thought is part of it is the federal highway system was built in the 50s during my childhood, and it was one of the first federalized projects. And since then, we've federalized everything, which means that a lot of places, a lot of states don't get what they need because they no longer have the power or the budget. So we have to really think about how the states having a voice in what they need, because when you say infrastructure, not everyone needs the same stuff. Some people need broadband, some people need bridges.
Yeah.
You know what's interesting is we're talking about all the different structures people need, right? That's the whole point. We're those of us that are building the metaverse and know what the metaverse is, that have developed. I'm talking about platform developers, right? Not just creating a Wix website, right? Like build massive platforms that thousands of people use, and in many different countries, right? There's a lot of people those that have done that work, right? And have worked in the public sector and whatnot. I mean, those are the people that should be kind of making decisions for what we're building, because we're building a brand, like the scale. This is bigger than the printing press when it came out. Like this is like that kind of shift in human evolution. Like, you know, there was humans before the printing press, you know, handwritten books only. And then afterwards, big, huge jump. This is a huge jump that we're doing right now to the metaverse with holograms and basically overlays of reality on top of us. And we have to consider the fact that all of the things in the real world, like the bridges and the roads and the common things we use, even this broadband technology, we're still talking about that. All that is going to be built. Those functions are going to be in the metaverse, such as movement, transport, right? How you have a bunch of people organized together. Well, that environment that they organize together, who's going to own that, right? Like we got to think about how these things are going to be built and what are going to be the utilities in the metaverse that everybody's going to be commonly used, and like do it right this time so that we don't have this problem, that we can intelligently amplify human beings and amplify them instead of control them and extract from them. We can amplify them if they have a open source amplification platform. I might have to.
So there's
I
a
mean,
couple.
the one
Go
thing
ahead.
that I'm really curious about, I'm so sorry, Tyler.
Go ahead.
Thank you. The one thing that I'm really curious about is, so this is not the first time. This medicine piece is the part that I find a little perplexing, right? Because the whole point of a metaverse is it's non-corporeal, and what does medicine require? A freaking corpus, right? So the one thing I could see is maybe therapy in various forms working really well in a metaverse. But I've heard this thing before of people who are like, we're going to do everything in the metaverse, which was honestly like what people were thinking with blockchain, right? Is we're going to do everything that we do with the internet on blockchain. That makes no sense. The metaverse is not a copy of the real world either. It has some advantages and some disadvantages, but I find these kinds of statements honestly really irresponsible
I would
because
say something on this. In 1,000 years, this reality, the metaverse reality, will be the same as this reality. This is my point.
I agree with John on this point, John Francois, because in a lot of you will remember me rambling for hours about about this very thing. But in my opinion, the metaverse genuinely is a new world overlaid on top of our own. But in my opinion, it's also no different than the infinite other universes that are laid on top of our own. We just happen to be the ones building this one. And I think that it's going to operate just like this world does, but just on a slight shift. And so, for example, whereas kids who are in underprivileged neighborhoods, who have to go to school and walk through metal detectors every day, when they go in, and they can't focus because they got to worry about the kids in the back of the class who are planning on jumping them at any given point. And even if they were focusing, their textbooks are missing 87 of the 132 pages or whatever. This particular kid is going to benefit from the metaverse because he's going to be able to go to class in a very safe environment where he can, and it's going to be this really ridiculously beautiful campus that allows him to focus, and he's going to be able to sit wherever he wants without being picked on and bothered.
Oh my
He's
God, you
going to
make a
have a
great
book.
point,
He's
Michael.
going to have a book that will never be destroyed. That book will always be in pristine condition. And these are kids who in this world, they're underprivileged and they don't have access to that. But in the metaverse, they're going to be able to attend these really amazing schools. And then, obviously you have the question of, okay, but how is the physical child going to get access to the equipment to allow them to access this supposed meta education that I'm referring to? And
It's
that's a
gonna be
different
cheap.
conversation. But the point is that it's going to allow for these types of things. And as far as medicine is concerned, I always bring up the point that I envision, me putting on a completely to the millimeter haptic suit and having a doctor on the other side of the world say, how does it feel right here? And he's got on these haptic gloves and he can physically, virtually feel the back of my knee and move it around, and it's manipulating the suit that I'm wearing. And when I say, it's right there, it's like we're in the same room, and we're going to get to a point where we're able to do these types of things. And there's so many ways that we're going to be able to connect what we do in this world to the things that we do in the metaverse. Another example that I like to use that I envision is shopping. Imagine going somewhere, let's say like Target, and you want to try on clothes, and you're walking around and you kind of just swipe at the things that are on the different hangers, and you just swipe and they all just kind of pile up behind you and follow your avatar around. And you go into
Okay.
a virtual
Oh,
And
wait,
room and
can
you're
I just
staring in
finish
a
though?
mirror.
I
Wait,
just want to add
can I
something on
can
Michael.
I
Just
No,
just
no,
one
no,
wait,
minute.
wait,
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 wait.
wait.
Hold on.
Ladies first, and
Alexandra was
then
in the
ladies
middle of the
first.
point.
Ladies first.
Yes.
Ladies
Yes.
first.
Thank you
Alexandra
very
was
much.
in the middle of the point. So, Michael, those are excellent, excellent examples. But I just want her to be able to finish the point that she started maybe 4 minutes
Oh
ago.
yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Lakeisha. So I mean, I have talked extensively about the metaverse and what it can do. The thing is, first, I think it's completely impractical to try and fund now or even regulate now or something that in 1,000 years will be true, right? We have zero ability to do that. So I think that that's kind of a facetious argument. And then the second is, in terms of medicine, right now the problem is access, right? We don't have haptic suits. So somebody trying to fund something and saying this is going to help medicine, and there are two projects that I know right now that are saying we're going to put medicine in the metaverse. The metaverse isn't even technologically ready for anything like that. We are way behind in things like AI and VR, and AR. We are way behind that. So all of this stuff
Behind
is
what?
all of this stuff is optimistic.
Alexandra, let me tell
Can I
you. I'll tell you two
wait? No, can
devices,
I
by
just
the way,
very
that will
Alexandra,
show
Let
you
her
this.
let her
finish.
finish.
Let
can I
us
please?
finish.
Okay, we're way behind all of these things. So if a mayor, I'm going back to the original article, a mayor is saying we're going to put all this stuff in this metaverse where it's still, $800 for, the even just an Oculus to begin to access this stuff. So the access isn't there. And then they're saying we're going to put medicine in there. And I don't know what that means necessarily. It can't mean the practice of medicine because we don't even have that that well in telemedicine. We still have a number of issues in telemedicine, which is I can see my husband's a doctor and he does this at home, and I see all the limitations and all the frustrations. And that's with a very, like up to date advanced system that we have in the real world. We're just not there yet. So when a city is saying we're going to put all these things in, or a project is saying we're gonna do all this stuff with medicine, there isn't an application there yet. In the future, will there be? Oh, sure. But for right now, no. And they're funding right now as if you could build it today, and you cannot build it today. Things
Why?
with medicine I take very personally because there are a lot of people making a lot of claims that are unethical and illegal. And there are a lot of people claiming cures, and they can do this and they can do that. And all of that stuff, we have to shut it down immediately, because this is something that it would provide. Like, this is now people using funding
You
instead
have a
of
good
doing
point.
something to
You have a good
provide
point.
real world access to patients that exist, that can't afford an Oculus, that can't afford, that don't have this sort of idealistic scenario that none of us have, right? There, I'd rather they put money into seeing patients who are alive right now, who will not be alive in 1,000 years. None of us will be. patients that are alive now, we need to get access to them. This is about priorities. And I understand an ideal world, but a city does not have any business going in and saying we're going to allocate our financial resources that we give to medicine into a space that can't accept it, that we can't yet build anything in it, and we
Agreed.
can't do anything with that. Now I'm done.
I feel like you
Nope,
don't have any
I
business
I
agree.
telling
have
a
a
city what
pushback
they
to
can do.
that.
But it's a good point, Michael, because a lot of people will use the metaverse like momentum to crook people because this is what's
To
happening.
raise money.
Yeah, to raise
But
money,
To
here's
and
the
raise
thing
And
with
money.
that's the thing.
telehealth.
And
yeah,
that's
We
the thing.
haven't
Like I
spent
understand
money
what
on
you're
telehealth
saying.
to develop it. And we're getting into this dangerous space where medicine is always behind the curve because we're consistently thinking that it's limited. If we start to
Mm,
think innovatively, then maybe perhaps we'll get it up to speed. 2014, there was a company that did great work in telehealth, but they got no support, no financial support, and no buy in from medicine. And I've seen this happen for 25 years now
Yeah,
in medicine,
Porgy
where people
existed.
consistently push back and say it's not possible. It would be if we all rallied around it and got minds around it. So it's not that it's not
thank you.
possible. It's are we allocating funds, resources, and minds to make it possible? And
and
I end
and
there.
regarding the hardware, like at this point we have 6.4 billion user of smartphone, so 80% of the population have smartphone. So we can extrapolate that in 10 years we will have the same rate regarding Oculus headset or any other company headset.
Not to mention that an Oculus isn't $800. You can get 2.5 Oculuses
Yeah,
for eight
and
hundred
Well,
face
dollars.
and
that's
Zuckerberg
what it said
mentioned.
in the article, and there's no logical analysis between the number of people with smartphones and the number of people with Oculuses. We have no data
Oh yeah,
regarding
this is
uptake rate.
like you need to understand that what's happening with those headsets will be the next smartphone.
But
So
that's not. But you don't have
back in the
data.
days, you can
It
do this
hasn't been out
relation with
long enough, and you
computers
don't
and
have data that says
smartphone. The
everybody
But
with
same
here's
these
the thing.
type of
relationship
people.
between smartphone and computers that exists back in the days is the same relationship that you can do on the
Facts.
Oculus with the smartphone. This is the main.
But what I'm saying is you
Can
don't
I
have the
add
data to back up
some
that claim
perspective
yet.
here?
You can't actually
No,
draw an
for sure.
analogy between two data points if you don't have that type of data on the second point. This is what you call like apples and oranges, right? Maybe people with cell phones will purchase Oculus. Maybe they'll purchase a different one. Maybe they'll purchase none at all.
Yeah,
Maybe they
yeah.
will purchase it at a rate higher or lower. Like it's impossible to tell until we have data. I
Here's
just
the
want
thing though.
money to follow data,
What we
not
Here's
do?
the
Hold
thing.
on,
Here's
hold
the
on.
thing though.
Let me just tell
Because
you
you
two
got to
points.
remember that
But guys, we
an
there's two
iPhone is
there's 2 points that matter that people
$1,400
don't know
and it
about.
sells out immediately. An iPhone is $1,400 and sells out immediately. An Oculus is $300. You can supply your entire household with Oculuses over one iPhone. Not even just one iPhone, over
But
a
no,
Galaxy or anything else, and they
nobody's
all
gonna
sell
walk
out
with a box on
immediately.
their face.
My point here is,
No,
yeah,
nobody's
that's
gonna
true, but
walk
we
in the
also have
metaverse
contacts
with
that
That's
a
are
why
being
they're
box on their
building the
developed.
face,
Ray
man.
Ban.
We also have contacts that are being developed. We also
But
have
listen,
AR glasses. We have all these things.
the point is they already have the tech exists. The best holographic tech I've seen already exists and went through DARPA and is going through FDA stuff right now. Right? It's Immacula.io, EMACULA.io. It's like Netflix brought stuff like the holographic stuff, like as cool as you see it in Netflix, brought to life. Right, that exists, and then yes, the haptic glove system, it exists too. Right, you have the Sensory X gloves, which are the best ones. And here's the problem: at the interaction point, it's all about IP. Right, the way you need to take the physics of the real world and apply it to the metaverse. And when you do that, you have to be able to restrict the joints in the hand to interact with the holograms. That's where the big old actions at. And there's people that have done that, and they're using ferromagnetic fluids, which is an old tech. But are they going to say the IP now that they own that tech? Because if you own that tech, and that there's only a few ways to basically restrict the joints so you can interact with the hologram in the metaverse the way you're supposed to. And I could riff all day about how many uses that could go on with that we have planned and stuff. But the main thing is that IP of interacting with that hologram is a control point to access of the entire metaverse. Same thing with the eyeballs, right? The holograms. Yes, I understand that there's also blind people, and so that means even auditory. The access points to the metaverse, those need to be open. Like they have to stay open. The access points. We have to like sit
Nobody
there
said that they
and
shouldn't be.
IP in the IP law be like, let's not be stupid. Let's be smart. The access points need to be open into the metaverse.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
what's
fine.
an
Nobody
access
said that
point
they
though?
shouldn't be.
So back on the Korea point, when governments get into the metaverse, might they try to manifest actual governance in the same way that we think of the tech companies, the big tech companies today are starting to act more and more like governments. In fact, one of the big headlines today is that Facebook is saying they can't even deal with all of the Facebook oversight boards, suggestions that they follow, and they need to create new subcommittees to deal with all of the actions that the oversight board is asking them to do, and they're starting to make a government there inside of Facebook with these different agencies. And then we look at actual governments going into the metaverse. Well, those are two different walled gardens. I mean, states, countries are walled gardens in the very literal sense. They have actual borders. The big tech companies also start to act like countries, or we call them walled garden. We might as well call them countries. They have actual borders, and they have different tax rates of like 30%. That they charge their apps and whatnot. What happens in the metaverse when Korea creates their claim? They stake out their domain and their territory in the metaverse, and they say, yeah, you can participate in Korea. We've got every Korean business right here in the Korean part of the metaverse, and if you do business with them, you're going to have to pay taxes to us for doing business with our Korean businesses in the metaverse. And if you're a Korean business and you want to be in the metaverse, you must register with our Korean domain in the metaverse so that people can find you in the Korean metaverse, and everyone knows. You see what I'm saying? It's like this.
Yep.
Can
So the
and would
people will go on
actually
the
Yes.
moon
happen. Yes,
metaverse.
Yes.
yes, that's
Yes.
exactly how it would
Well,
occur.
The
but
people
here's
will
the weird
use
part.
space internet.
Here's the
And
truly
we're
crazy
gonna
thought.
talk
Wait,
about
hang
it.
on, Maurer. Here's the truly crazy thought is on planet Earth, every piece of land is claimed by a country of some kind. There's no unclaimed land other than floating in the open seas. However, in the metaverse, every country can do what I'm proposing that Korea might do, and that's fine. However, and every big company like the Facebooks and Apples and Tencents and whoever might also try and make their own walled gardens and app stores, where if you're operating in their app store with their apps, then you got to pay them their 30% tax inside of the Apple App Store in the metaverse. But there's still plenty of room, in fact, unlimited room, because it's not a defined geography. It's not a terminally defined geography. It's boundless. So we could act for the first time as independent, sovereign individuals in the metaverse that we started out doing in the early days of the internet. We kind of got away from in the smartphone era because we're tied to the devices, and the devices kind of force us to become citizens of those devices. And the same likely will happen in the metaverse because the devices, again, might try to control us as citizens of their devices in that metaverse. But there's the potential to be sovereign individuals. And this is where it gets really interesting, because the interoperability of these different walled gardens and or countries will likely be all benefit equally if we create a protocol of blockchain-based identity of sovereign.
Exactly.
But that is
Yes.
already being
He's right
worked
on
on.
point,
I know.
Banana.
Well, it's
Identity is a
my dear friend
massive
Nicholas, who
issue.
comes in here
But
regularly, who's working on that. My point is, and I had a guy yesterday or Monday night at my event in Stockholm also working on it. My point is, the verifiable identity that you can then jump from experience to experience or country to country or walled garden to walled garden in the metaverse, it's going to be very important that you're able to prove who you are, because if we're using avatars, that is the conditions for incredible manipulation and what's the word I'm looking for? Fraud, where you're going to want to know
What?
who you're talking to in the age of deepfakes in the metaverse. So we're going to need a system where you can prove your identity and transfer that identity from experience to experience equally. So this sovereign identity concept gets very, very interesting very quickly, especially when you're not in one of those private countries, when you want to exist separate from it. And we all agree to go to some sort of like open, egalitarian, utopian, Burning Man like part of the metaverse,
The dark web.
or AKA the
But
dark
see,
web.
I
Yeah.
see for this
Here's how you
primarily, I
do it.
see the big risk
Let me
as
tell you.
again exclusion, right? So first, what happens when you have countries that have capital controls or labor controls that decide to go into the universe basically just to prevent anything moving out of their country, because it could virtual, like, the virtual universe is still real money, right? So if real money is being translated, not only are you worried about tax issues and stuff like that, which is fine, I don't worry about taxes and stuff, but about if you worry about someone saying, no, you can't actually conduct that transaction, or you can't have access to that information because my country's regulations are precluding you from doing that, even in a metaverse. And then the other thing is, you're going to have a lot of trouble with countries or cities or any locality saying, we're going to allocate these resources to the metaverse, when not everybody is going to have access to the metaverse, which means, again, you're going to have some people benefiting from it at the expense of other people. And you're going, because money is finite for every resource. Money is one of, it's the limiting reagent for most things, especially in government. And the problem is, you're going to have people who are saying, why are you putting money into that, the metaverse, where only a number of people can actually go in, and we, like, right now there is a capacity issue, but only, people with particular resources get to go in. But the rest of us are sitting here, and we would like more money for, hospitals, or for free care of some sort, or for emergency food programs, or things like that. That is play. This is work. Like, that's going to be a huge issue. I'm not actually saying one way or the other that either is right. I'm just saying I see these battles coming ahead, and I really feel for the people who have governments who tend to be more restrictive, or especially if you use CBDCs, these people are going to be able to track everything you're doing in the metaverse. So it will literally not provide the freedom that most people are anticipating eagerly from the metaverse. So they won't be able to experience it in the form that other people can, when they're not necessarily being tracked or restricted. I mean, in all these walled gardens, especially when you have companies that are going to buy real estate and then they're going to charge admission fees. And then we have the same situation, right? Which is, and I'm not saying admission fees are bad. I'm just saying that we're going to end up, no matter what we end up doing, unless we're consciously building against it, our natural inclination is always to basically exclude some people at the benefit of others, and we just need to constantly watch that.
Isn't
But
that
you know what's
destiny?
cool? Hey,
That's just
let me just say, it's
humankind.
cool that we're
We
talking
do
about
that
it,
now
because
also.
like, one thing I just want to say, it is really cool, and thank you, Tyler, for letting us talk about it, right? Because this is the most important. Like, let's learn from what we've gathered before, and if everybody kind of debates and talks about it, and like all the developers and everybody kind of gets in, we need to talk about what this thing is going to look like, and how we're going to have governance in this metaverse thing, which has every human being around the planet connected to it, especially like the stuff's already here. Imagula's here, Sensory X here, Elon's chunking up a bunch of satellites up in the sky. Everybody's going to be connected. That's a game changer, man. That's a big time game changer. Everybody around the planet is going to be able to bypass the government. Boom, go straight up to the satellite. What, you're going to stop Elon? Right? You ain't stopping Elon. That's what he's doing. He's giving the whole planet internet access. Okay. Right. Let's see how the regulations come. We want that to be unrestricted. All right, we want those access points, because that's what it is. That's going to be the new access point. Going up through those satellites to get to the metaverse. That's an access point. We need those access points to be open and not a place to suck out data. And we need data sovereignty. And the way you do that is actually pretty easy. You have an identity. You already have the Bitcoin wallet. You attach your ID, but you got to go another level further to really get into it, which is we have connections. So who are we connected to? That's in part of our identity. And then which groups are we part of? Because it's all the same things across all these different platforms. At the end of the day, the way it goes into the database is the same thing. You have people, who they follow, who follows them, connection, the relationship between those two. Extrapolate that out. They're going to be in groups. They're hanging out in a group. Within groups, there's these different people. So that functionality, that logic layer, if you attach that into our open identities, who we're connected to as well in our wallet and our metadata, and then that is then created and it's distributed peer to peer. Microsoft just came out with a 500 terabyte disk, a little mini disk thing, right? We might have a peer-to-peer network, right, where things can basically be traveled. You use some RAID configuration, just like Bitcoin does, and distribute the information across all these different devices. And if all those access points are allowed, then we can now have peer-to-peer storage of the data, and we have an open identity, and then now platforms can really flourish. They could like take off because then they don't have to create that layer every time. That's a common layer, and then we as citizens in whatever metaverse we want to be involved in can decide who the fuck has access to what piece of our data in which metaverse, right? We control our identity, not anybody else, and we could do that with this stack, and then all the platforms could start to explode because they don't have to create that, and then they could just focus on the UI layer and the logic layer of interacting with the data, right? That's what should happen. I'll stop there
Can I
for
Well,
now.
say
I had
something?
to.
This is Rob for a
yeah, go
second.
ahead.
All right. Power consolidates, and power always overtakes the concept of utopia. So it's great to have these discussions, and I think it's great to talk about what is open, but humans always eventually congregate, and power always builds walls. So
Yes,
just be prepared for it.
you're right, Robert.
Yep. Good reminder
That's
to.
literally what I said.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
somebody sent me a thing saying that medicine in the metaverse is medicine, which I thought was very funny. And I'm tired I apologize all the time, and I'm so sorry. I'm not so sorry. I'm so sick of actually hearing myself apologize. If there are any other women who have a tendency to do that, especially in a room filled with men, uh, like help me stop. Literally help me stop doing that,
I got
because
you,
always
I
Alexandra.
calling
got
Yeah, we
you.
do it.
and
We do
I'm
it
Yeah.
sick
far
of that.
too often
My
for no
father
good
used to
reason.
say, never say sorry. You're not sorry about anything that comes out your mouth. So don't be sorry.
That's right.
There's a
It's
couple.
just a habit. It's a habit of banning those words, and we've worked with ourselves and our daughter on it when we do public speaking. So I don't even put them in my lexicon.
No, actually, it's a culture thing as well because in Japan, you say sumimasen very regularly. It's just out of politeness. It doesn't really mean anything
It
much.
all means
Just
different,
being
and
polite.
again,
Yeah.
that goes back to literally what we were just talking about, which is culture. Culture is going to have a very big impact on, people look at one metaverse and they say things shouldn't happen there, or a city shouldn't be able to X, Y, or Z. But it's if it's not your culture, and it's not your business, or it's not your thing, like we can't try to force everyone to think the way we do, and no individual should try to force another place to think or abide by whatever logic or rules they think are abide by. And when we talk about these things, and we talk about South Korea creating their virtual city already, I think that's genius, and I think it's important. And just by the way, everything I described earlier, the kid who can't get a good education in our world doing it in the metaverse, and shopping and swipe, every single thing I said is already being done. We are not light years away from that. For those of you in the audience who might have believed that, that's not true at all. It's all here right now. I've done all those things already. They exist.
I've seen them.
Very, yeah, exactly. And so for anyone down there who heard whoever earlier was like, it's impossible, blah, blah, no, it's possible, and it's right now. We're doing those things right now. And this is the reason that I bring it up. I envision that on a bigger scale. In the metaverse, if there's anything the metaverse provides, and it's really important to me that, I don't like stunting growth. I don't like it when people are like, well, 1,000 years from now, we're all going to be dead. And that's when it'll be able to happen. Every fucking thing that happens 1,000 years from now has to start somewhere. Someone at some point has to say, well, we might as well start figuring this shit out now. At some point, that part has to happen. We are the generation that has to happen on. And the reason I say we're the generation that has to happen on is because we're the generation that started all this shit. And when I say a generation, I'm speaking on a much bigger scale. I'm talking about this particular century. If you're a part of this particular century, you are a part of everything from engineering to infrastructure to buildings to skyscrapers, all the way down to 4 millimeter processors and nanometers and microscopic, as far down as these chip companies decide to take it. We are all a part of that. And we're the ones who have to figure out how to make this thing expand, and how to make this thing literally provide for and have room for everyone that's on this planet right now to be in. And we start talking about things like accessibility, and will it leaves people behind and all that. Everything does in the beginning. That's how it always is.
But
Because
but
wait. Everything does in the beginning. That's how it always is. Because at the beginning of it all, somebody with a whole lot of money has to say, "All right, I'm throwing a whole lot of money at this. Let's do it." And so while those people are doing it, obviously the people who are doing it and have the money and the haves are the those are the rats in the maze. Those are the ones that we figure out how to do all of it on, the early adopters, the people who have the 5,000 to buy the new MacBook and on all this, that, and the third. That's how we figure out how it all works. But guess what? If you want a MacBook today and you can't afford a MacBook from today, you can still get one from 2011 for $100. And that's kind of how this all goes. It trickles down with technology eventually, but there has to be a starting point. There has to be a grounds where we jump on and we just go for it. And I understand all the other stuff we're talking about, but at no point do I ever think it's healthy to stunt growth or to stunt even imagination. It's okay to say, well, we can't do that today, but it's never okay to say, so don't bother trying.
I don't think
Yeah,
anybody is saying so.
how
Don't bother
how many
trying. I
satellites are
think.
being launched
Wait.
up?
I think.
Maurer, he was
Wait, let me ask you
talking
guys
I
something
don't
real
think
to
quick. Hold on.
anybody's.
Alexandra.
I
Let her
just want.
respond.
Thank you. I don't think anybody is saying don't bother trying. What I think is someone saying, invest your money in me now so that I can do this. I think we have to say, can you do that now? Or is that a claim you can't make, and you're putting in a layer of groundwork that's 1,000 feet below where you said your groundwork was? I think that's the first thing. It's misleading for people to say, let's do this right now. The second thing is, if we're talking about things that we're terrified about or want to make happen in 1,000 years, I mean, all your extra money should go into making sure climate change doesn't happen, and so we can actually, have a planet, right? So we talk about priorities. Everybody has priorities, and to say, like, well, let's throw everything into one basket, which I don't think you're saying. I'm just saying that that's an interpretation of it, is, like, everybody move forward and build into this metaverse or whatever, when we have people who can't get healthcare, can't get food or things like that. We have to think that these are priorities, and people are always moving as fast as they can. So they may be building for, the future, but that future isn't going to arrive soon enough for people who have the resources and time to experience it now. And it's going to already be too soon for people who would prefer all money be shifted to emergency resources. So just recognize there's a constant push and pull for stuff. I think what's being built for the next 1,000 years is being built the same way. Everything is always being built for 1,000 years, which is everybody is moving as fast as they can to the future, at the same time trying to take care of the immediate priorities. The one risk that I see happening, especially with technology and with everything that's built, is that who's going to be building? It's the people who have all the resources, and they're going to build in a manner that they choose. This is the same problem that I see in gaming, especially in blockchain gaming, right? In the crypto world. The games are all designed for the people who were the early adopters and who were the designers, right? And it's pretty much built for young men. And I have this conversation with them all the time. The judgment basically is, well, young men are the only ones paying, and that's why we're building for them. And that is confirmation bias. The reason the young men are the only ones who are paying for it, for the most part, is because you're building for them, and they're the ones who find value in it, find ways to create value outside of your direct benefit, and the world opens up. That's unfortunately not the way most people build. But again, these are just things we have to be very conscious of, which, if we can build consciously for the future, then one of the things we're going to do is make sure that people who are not of the group of people who are funding it, who are taking part in the early adoption phase, will actually have a say in what the future holds, and things will be built for people that are not them. That is a huge problem across cultures. People build
Yes.
for themselves. They don't build for people who are not them, for which they cannot gain direct benefit.
So
Well, the way
there's a
you do
nice
it, by the way, is you
Hold on,
show
it's
up.
Yeah.
You show
Maurer's
up with.
turn. Maurer's turn. Go ahead.
Yeah. It's matter. By the way, but it's okay. The way we get in, right? Like, guys, we're talking about it from the U.S. I'm sitting right now in Kashmir, occupied as Kashmir, with like dudes running around with like machine guns and shit everywhere. Okay, right? That's where I'm at right now. Like I see what occupation looks like right here, but what I also see is, holy cow, they're about to have satellites flown up in the sky with direct access to the whole planet real quick. And by the way, the cost, the phones, they're going to go away, and it's going to come really fast, right? Because the cost of augmented reality glasses is drastically cheaper than it is to make the phone thing, right? And because 75% of that phone is at battery anyway in the screen, you eliminate that, you just have a couple chips in there, and you basically have a lot less power consumption because you don't have the screen, you're having holograms, right? And that's a game changer. And then those things connected up to the internet is a game changer. The real question, we got to talk about things that are important. Here's my question. We're going to have a global internet, literally with satellites all around the sky. And that's how we're going to access it, because the latency is actually 30% less when you go from New York to the London Stock Exchange. And high frequency traders will pay a lot of money for 30% quicker speed to get across, even faster than fiber when it's going across the oceans, right? So like that's important. Those are important things because that's where everything's going to shift. But all those satellites are floating up in space. Who owns that? That's common area. If we're transmitting our information up and down these lines, because that is the choke point where the transmission is occurring, right? That's where you could choke people off from the internet or not, which is choking people off from the metaverse, literally. How do we want that to be? Do we want that to be open and people not snooping up and down in that network system? That's real shit that I see.
But that's
You know, like that's the
that's
access
a
point.
whole
That's the
other topic
That's
for another room,
yeah,
though.
that's a big fucking topic.
Okay, so we got to get in. We've only covered, believe it or not, one
Right.
article, and we're now
Wait, one.
an hour and a half.
I
Two.
thought it was
You need
three.
to
We
have
covered
like a
two. We
30
covered
minute
two.
rumble
I was
session,
optimistic
Tyler.
there.
Let them have it
I
out.
felt like
And
I was in
then
a fucking metaverse.
I
Oh,
don't
it's
have
on
many.
yeah,
fire
it's like the
today.
meta room.
For a second
Exactly.
there, it
This is
felt like
this.
the early days of
I
tech
know this is
news.
old school tech news
Yeah,
around the
this
world,
is
by the
old
way.
school.
OG
Damn.
I just
style.
want to
Yeah.
say
The
It's like the
Roblox
early
validate
days
OG
of
people
stuff.
with
I
Oprah.
love that.
Remember
crazy.
Oprah in the early
I like
days?
this tech news.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, I miss it.
This is what
Old
happens when
school.
Michael brings
Thanks
his
for
magic
Michael
back
and
to the
I
room.
Mitch.
know, Michael. You need to come back more often.
Yeah. So the second article, and we'll try and just we have. I actually have more articles to read today than I've ever had in any other room. So I'm just going to actually give the best ones. We're going to focus on the interesting ones and big ones. So, the UK Supreme Court dismisses a lawsuit against Google that was seeking $4 billion for tracking iOS Safari users without their consent. Okay. But the EU's General Court upholds a 2.4 billion euro fine against Google. So Google avoided a $4 billion ruling in the UK Supreme Court, got hit up. The 2.4 billion euro fine was upheld against Google for abusing search engine dominance by promoting its own shopping service. Okay. Next, New York Times says that Meta, formerly known as Facebook, aims to remove ad targeting options based on user interactions with content around health, race, political affiliation, religion, sexuality, and many more things, and call us skeptical because that does not seem like a typical move Facebook would do to self-censor, especially something that would cost them a lot of money. This would be a very unprecedented move for Facebook, but let's see. We'll find out if that's sincere or not. So the next one is Google launches a brand new thing called Project Relate, a beta Android app that English speakers with speech impairments can use as a voice assistant. It builds on Google's Project Euphonia. Google launched as a beta app today that people with speech impairments or impediments can use. So I guess it understands people with speech impediments or impairments and can help them translate that for them. Let's see if that's in fact what it's doing. There's a video here. Cheryl, can you pin this one to the room? It says, after sharing their voice samples, volunteers will get access to 3 new features on the Relate app. It can transcribe their speech in real time. It also has a feature called Repeat that will restate what the user said in a clear, synthesized voice. That can help people with speech impairments when having conversations or when using voice commands for home assistant devices. So, wow, the Google Assistant will be able to understand people who have speech impairments. That's pretty freaking cool, I gotta say.
That's really sweet, Tyler. That reminds me of another one that I saw today. I can't find it, but I'll try and find it and send it over to you. Where a group of researchers developed a BCI that's enabled people to write using the interface, so direct from the computer brain interface to a keyboard, and actually type out the things that they were thinking of. And then I think they also attached it to some servos and whatnot, and actually got them to write. So they tested this with some people who were paralyzed
That sounds
and
amazing.
unable to write. And it's.
So speaking of the metaverse, I have 4 quick articles back to back that are all news that's happening today related to the metaverse. Number 1 is Unity is one of the big game development platforms that is also, when you're building video games, it's barely different from building for the metaverse. And Unity is one of the 2 big game development engines. And Unity today acquires Peter Jackson, the main person behind the Lord of the Rings movies, which has very top.
Oh yeah, sold.
The digital characters in those movies, look absolutely stunningly real, and that's due to their digital, mastery and Hollywood magic, which that company is called Weta, Weta, and it's regarded as one of the best in the biz in Hollywood. So Unity, the game engine, buying Weta Digital, including the 275, digital engineers for $1.6 billion. Their special effects artists will form the new entity. Unity has announced its intent to acquire Weta Digital, the legendary visual effects company, co-founded by Peter Jackson, for $1.6 billion. This is really cool because Unity makes it very simplistic, shockingly simple to make incredibly gorgeous, lifelike scenarios and now avatars. And with this Weta Digital thing, I have to assume we're going to have nearly Lord of the Rings like level of quality of metaverse experiences that are editable digitally. And Facebook must be shitting themselves, because this is going to be incredibly attractive to people who want to design for the metaverse. So two other related headlines is today, NVIDIA, the main chip manufacturer, says NVIDIA releases software tools for crafting virtual worlds. NVIDIA on Tuesday released a set of tools for software developers aimed at helping them create a metaverse of 3-dimensional virtual worlds. So you've got NVIDIA today jumping into this race of creating a platform for people to create metaverse worlds. You've got yesterday Niantic, which is Pokemon Go, doing exactly the same. I think they called it Is it Lighthouse? What was it called, JT?
Yeah. JT's at awe.
Okay, if Dr. Fran, do you remember the name of Niantic's?
It was Lighthouse. Lighthouse AR, because it's really an AR release,
Right.
not a VR.
Yes, so you've got Niantic, you've got NVIDIA in the span of 24 hours both, and you've got Unity buying this incredible acquisition. Look how fast the metaverse is coming together, where these mega players are jumping all over themselves to be platforms for people to build the metaverse on.
I want Weta to have Andy Serkis be every character.
But it's true. It's truly, beyond impressive how much energy and momentum and focus and finances are pushing at this rate. When you have companies moving this quickly, it's real this time, because this whole idea of VR, is it going to be real? People have been asking that question for about 20 years. But when you see headlines this big, this close together, 24 hours apart, that's when it's
not only real, it's here. That's when it's here.
They're making massive bets now. So there's another one. Microsoft partners with Facebook to integrate Microsoft Teams, which is their version of Zoom, for example, into Facebook's metaverse workplace environment. So you
I
can
saw
use.
that one, and the comments are hysterical on it because they're like, that's not the use case most people are interested in.
Right.
So they thought it was really funny, and apparently it was tested. So it's at the point where it's actually been tested, and the commentary is pretty hysterical. I think we read a comment months ago, or a series of comments from somebody who was talking about a new thing, and maybe it was Team something like that, but it was hysterical. I think it was the same guy who did this commentary because it was ridiculously funny, but mostly it was like, this is a terrible idea. So, but I don't know if anybody's actually tried it yet.
No, it is. That's correct. That it's like, no, that's not going to get a lot of people excited. That's not a use case they're going to be excited about. However, what it does highlight is how quickly and how possible it is to bring your existing apps from the desktop or from your smartphones into the metaverse. So Microsoft Teams figured out how to get their app running in the metaverse rather quickly. It didn't take a year. It didn't take months. It took a week or 2 or 3. And that's incredibly good news because we're going to need to figure out ways to bring all of the desktop apps, all the websites, all of the smartphone apps somehow into the metaverse as easily as possible to make the metaverse more useful and valuable to everybody involved. Roblox CEO, Roblox itself is very much a metaverse-like experience. It's a world where people create in that world and they monetize their creations in that world. It's called Roblox. It's been around for a long time. And today, the Roblox founder and CEO said that the Roblox business plan 17 years ago predicted the rise of the metaverse. Roblox is really focused on the innovation to drive and shepherd this vision of what some people call the metaverse forward, says the CEO, David Baszucki. Okay, and then the next one is, he said this in an interview with CNBC, and NVIDIA announces the Omniverse is what they're calling their platform for creating the metaverse. It's called Omniverse. Okay, now we get into the other big headlines. For example, Qualcomm is saying they're producing the chips and the hardware, the chips, to build the bridge between the smartphones and the metaverse. So again, huge player making huge moves to enable this. Qualcomm unveils a Snapdragon Spaces XR development platform with hardware-agnostic APIs and support for Unreal Engine 4 and Unity. Again, huge player making a huge move to make a developer platform for the metaverse. Everyone's racing to make platforms for people to build their metaverse experiences because everybody in 1995 through 2000 made web pages, millions and millions of web pages. And then when the iPhone came out from 2007 till now, everyone's been making millions and millions and millions of apps. Every business, every startup has been making apps. Very soon, everyone's going to be making millions and millions and millions and millions of metaverse experiences. In many cases, converting their apps into metaverse experiences, 3D embodied experiences. And everyone wants to be the platform that you choose to build that experience because they're going to be able to control you and get the data and maybe even tax you. So that's why you're seeing Qualcomm and NVIDIA and Niantic and everybody, Facebook, all racing to create these platforms for people to build these metaverse experiences on. So the next one is that Apple is now going to make it easy for people to fix the broken screens on the iPhone 13. After all, it was going to be very difficult. It was also going to break your Face ID if you tried to do that, and now they figured out a way to enable people to fix stuff at non-Apple stores without breaking your Face ID. That's nice. The next one is that Facebook says it can't keep up with the Oversight Board, which has issued 78 recommendations since January. And so now they're trying to figure out what to do about that. Cryptocurrency exchange called Huobi says it will shut down operations in Singapore. Who cares? Trend Micro report details the activities of hacker for hire group dubbed Void Balor, which has targeted U.S. telecom companies and others since the mid-2010s. A look at New York City's growing VC scene as West Coast firms expand their presence in New York. Who cares? Coinbase did their Q3 revenue report, and usership is down on Coinbase because there's so many other competitors popping up all over the frickin' place. Users fell from 8.8 million to 7.4 million in the past 3 months, so the stock has dropped 10%. The chairman and CEO of Johnson & Johnson is stepping down and joining Apple's board. Tim Cook calls him a visionary in healthcare. Hint, hint. Gee, I wonder what's going on there. Apple, the CEO of one of the world's largest medical companies, is joining the board of Apple. I wonder if Apple's interested in healthcare. Geez, I wonder what Apple's thinking here. What could they is it? And I bet they're just dabbling. I bet they're just testing. They're just doing a little. They're not really that serious. They're just They're just putting one little tiny toe, the little tip of their tiny little toe in healthcare. It's not a big serious thing that they have in mind. Are you fucking kidding me? The whole next wave of Apple's future is health. Period.
Not just Apple, not just Apple. It'll be Google. It'll be all of them. They're all racing to healthcare.
No, Google's still doing it too. They're trying to head fake. They're all trying to head fake you and everyone else and each other because they don't want the regulators getting spooked when, you see how crazy things are already, and they don't even have a smart toilet in your house yet that can tell you everything that you're pooping and peeing and all the data they can get from that. Just wait till that happens.
Which, by the way, I would be excited for. I'm just saying.
So they're going to have sensors all over your body and rings on your fingers and AirPods in your ears. They're going to know every thought you have before you have it. And then wait to see what the regulators are going to try and do. It's going to be a nightmare. So they're trying to pretend like, no, we're not doing health. No, not at all. Don't worry about us. Don't worry about us. We're just a social network. Don't worry. Don't look at,
Nothing to see here.
Nothing to see
here. Look down. Don't look up.
Is that Elvis over there? So, Vimeo.
Isn't everybody like worried about that? To me, is like if they have so much of like health data, especially with the U.S., insurance-based healthcare, the insurance companies, if they get a hold of this data, they can discriminate anything pre-existing conditions and having shitty insurance, coverage and all that. Isn't that like, I mean, I would
No, you're
be.
right, Messeret, about the pre-existing conditions. But I know here in the U.S. with that last, with the Affordable Health Care Act, no one can discriminate if you have a pre-existing condition. But the thing is, people are people. They will choose convenience over practicality every time. So all these arguments about my data's this and data's that, as soon as you inconvenience someone's daily life, because I have to deal with it every day with users who are upset that we have MFA, multi-factor authentication, or they won't let us patch something because of some old system because it's convenient for them. People will always choose convenience over safety, security, and practicality. It is what it is, even with all this data. So inevitably, it's going to do. This is just a dance, just to look like they care. Sorry
And
to
the
sound so
insurance
cynical.
companies have had access to this data for quite some time also. I just want to be clear on that. They
What I
have
really
the
worry about is that
data.
now you can get so much, and if you're pregnant, like from a blood test, you can actually find out about a ton of potential birth defects and congenital issues. And what I really worry about is someone using that kind of data. I mean, maybe it's because I saw Gattaca and that freaked me out. But the more data people are acquiring, the more that they make business decisions around health. That is actually something that's particularly concerning to me. Like, I really don't want decisions about what I do or what, like, if I'm pregnant, what I do with a baby. I don't want any of that stuff being interfered with by someone else.
Oh,
But
you're
I mean,
absolutely right.
now it's possible that they can, because of different tools combined together, they could actually say, "Oh, wait, you're borderline diabetic. Don't buy that. I'm going to ability for you to actually make that purchase because it has Twinkies in it or something like that. If you use a CBDC combined with health data, you could do that. So that's the kind of stuff that I worry about. But I really worry about this whole idea of like proactive care, where it's basically, like what it comes down to on a financial system, on a regulatory system especially, is basically if we have fewer sick babies or we have, fewer sick people, then we have much less of a drain on our social system, our welfare system, et cetera. And that's actually one of the core tenets of eugenics. And that's all crap I hate. I mean, already people, you can like pick and choose certain characteristics on some level. But for the most part, the idea of saying some people are just too expensive to live or something like that, that's all stuff that's very hairy, but it always ends up like there's just such a direct route to that from anywhere you go. I know this is a tinfoil hat moment. I'm very sorry about that,
No.
but I do
It's
think
a
it's an
healthy
issue.
thing.
Oh, you just apologized
Don't
I
again.
know,
You just
but
Don't
apologized.
apologize,
I
but
know, but
but
that's
Don't
literally
worry, I'm
that's
all
She
for
the
does have a
truth.
population
point.
control.
Don't
But literally
worry.
that's
She's
it. When
just
you
being
something that
polite.
but
it
no,
lends
it's it.
itself more to a conspiracy theory than
Mhm.
it does fact right now. It's just so easy to see all of these different plays. Like, what do you do with data? You make decisions with it, right? And what do you do with what do governments and businesses do with data? They make business decisions with it. And so that's the kind of stuff that I'm really concerned about, because we're not putting up walls of the type and quantity of information, or even if it's anonymous. And that's what concerns me.
But they've been doing
Well,
this
you
with data for a very, very long time, even before all this data collection. I mean, look what they've been doing this since the 60s and 70s, looking at different communities and, placing labels. I mean, they use it. I mean, they've been doing it for years. It's just more efficient. That's the difference. The delivery mechanism for such things is just different. It's faster, it's more efficient, and the quality of the data is more vast. So literally right now, we have to think of mitigation. We have to identify those known risks, the unknown risks, treat it like a project and try to mitigate those ahead of time. And I believe our favorite person, Chris, along with Amy, we were talking one of the early days of one of Tyler's rooms, which is why I followed him, where they were talking about us taking more ownership of our data and being, if they're going to try to monetize us, we should get paid for our data, whether it's health, whether it's, our daily lives. We should be able to be the owners of our data. And that's probably one way to mitigate it, because if there's a cost to use us as a commodity, then it's open to less abuse. And then also to add to that too, with all this stuff that we're talking about, we got to just think of it as the 80-20 rule. I don't know if anybody knows the 80-20 rule.
Yeah, of course. Okay, is that you're landing the plane there? Oh.